Sound check, 1, 2, 3. Sound check, 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So the General Issues Committee budget meeting, it is January the 20th, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Just a gentle reminder that if you have an electronic device, if you can please turn it to a non-audible function. Joining me in council chambers today under a new seating arrangement, so I'm still not used to it. Councillor Ted McMeekin, Councillor John Paul Danko, Councillor Esther Pauls, Councillor Craig Kazar, Mayor Andrea Horvath, Councillor Cameron Kretsch, Councillor Brad Clark. Joining us virtually, Councillor Narinder Nan, Councillor Matt Francis. I would just like to note that Councillors Taddison and Beattie are doing an absolutely stellar job representing this community at ROMA, the Rural Ontario Municipalities of Ontario. And that is where they are, and that's where they have been since very early this morning, and that's where they will be tomorrow. So I know upon a grateful council, we give them our thanks. And Tammy as well, Councillor Tammy Wang as well. Legislative Coordinator McCrae, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are 7 added delegations and 10 added written delegations.
Okay. It's moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Kretsch to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion on this agenda? Seeing none. We can move on it. Oh, you just raise your hands. If I could see your hands to approve this agenda. All in favor, thank you. Any declarations of interest today? Seeing none. On to the approval of the minutes of November 28th, 2024. Councillor Kazar, Councillor Pauls. Any discussion on those minutes? Okay, a show of hands, please, to approve those minutes. Thank you. All hands up. Thank you. We're on to delegations. We have 12 delegations today, and we will take one motion after the last speaker to receive all of these delegations. Members and delegates, you are reminded that there is a 5-minute time limit, which will be adhered to during this meeting. You may submit another request to speak if you require additional time, but we would like to really underscore the 5-minute mark. Members of this council or committee are reminded that questions of the delegate are for clarification purposes. Okay, on to the first delegate. In person is Delegate Mike Collins-Williams from the West End Home Builders Association. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee, Mayor Horvath, staff, and members of the public. My name's Mike Collins-Williams, the CEO of the West End Home Builders Association. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to share with members of the GIC how one of the most important industries and employers in the city of Hamilton is doing as you all consider the city's budget for the coming year. Although I'm not here today to share a rosy picture about future city revenues and future employment. Currently, the residential construction industry employs about 20,000 people in Hamilton, ranging from skilled trades to planners, engineers, and architects, although that number is declining. We fuel significant revenue to the city through development charges, community benefits charges, cash in lieu of parkland fees, planning fees, and building permits, and of course support massive tax revenues for the provincial and federal governments. The new housing market in Hamilton is in the worst shape it's been since the mid-1990s. Last week, I shared housing start numbers through Q3 to the GIC. I now have the year-end 2024 numbers from CMHC. I can report that the City of Hamilton had 1,481 housing starts from January to December 2024. That is the second lowest number in the last 10 years. In 2023, by comparison, the number of housing starts was more than double, 3,347. This decline is driven by plummeting high-rise intensification starts. Many projects are underway in Hamilton and nearing completion, which is good news for an immediate injection of supply over the coming year, but very few are starting, which translate into a drastic decline in both construction and employment and completions in the coming years. Not only that, but by comparison in 2024, the city of Burlington, with less than half the population of Hamilton, vastly outperformed Hamilton in per capita housing starts. Again, the CMHC data released from Hamilton shows Hamilton with 1,481 starts, whereas Burlington had 1,132, which is their highest number in the last 10 years. In terms of mid-rise and high-rise condo sales numbers, the final numbers from Urban Nation just came in this morning. Hamilton had 1,603 sales in 2022, 749 in 2023, and in the last calendar year, just 285. Over the past 6 years, due to high levels of housing completions, residential assessment growth has actually blunted the requirement for this council to have to raise property taxes. By increasing the number of taxpayers and the tax productivity of land, the city is able to reduce pressure on the existing tax base and support local industry, workers, and businesses through more vibrant and populous communities. But this will not continue if Hamilton doesn't address its declining housing starts. Burlington gets it. Hamilton needs to adopt a more business-friendly and growth-oriented approach. To put it bluntly, things are not working very well here. We've seen year-over-year DC increases, which are now up by 87% since 2021. We've seen staff being directed to address symptoms of the problem through increased studies, bureaucracy, and policies, but we haven't seen many systematic improvements to the planning process. All the while, young families continue to leave the region in growing numbers in search of available housing elsewhere. While I acknowledge, and I'll certainly applaud Hamilton's recent investments in below-market affordable housing, on the private application side of the equation, which the vast majority of Hamiltonians live or aspire to live in, Hamilton seems to refuse to build housing on plazas, greenfields, parking lots, unused school sites, or downtown at respectable heights, or really anywhere at all. Anything remotely controversial ends up at the Ontario Land Tribunal. It seems Hamilton is really going beyond the NIMBY territory into banana, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. If the city is serious about solving the housing and homelessness crisis, the city can no longer continue on the path of drastic year-over-year increases to fees and charges while simultaneously withdrawing support for programs like the Downtown CIP that incentivize intensification and housing. At current cost of construction, constant delays in processing applications, and punting everything to the tribunal, the industry is unable to deliver homes. And I can confidently predict that housing starts will be even lower in 2025. But this doesn't just impact our bottom line, it also impacts yours. Not only no assessment growth, but planning application fees cover the cost of your staff resources. Layoffs are already happening across the private sector. Declining applications mean it's only a matter of time before the public sector feels it as well. We need to solve this. I'm hopeful today's delegation is the start of a meaningful, though tough conversation on how the city can improve moving forward, because things cannot continue in the manner they have been. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Are there any questions? I'll recognize Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Pauls.
Thank you very much, Chair Wilson. May I inquire of the delegate, what exactly would he like to see the city improve?
That could be a very long answer, but I'll be brief. I recognize that the city is in a tough financial position in terms of property tax increases last year and this year. We're not asking you to reduce government-imposed charges and fees on the industry at the time. We're just asking you to stop increasing them as significantly year over year so that the industry can take time to adjust. In terms of planning, we'd like to see more decisions made within a decision timeline so that we're not stuck going to the tribunal and you're not stuck going to the tribunal. I think it would be an interesting case study to see how much money the city does spend defending either decisions that you've made against applications or the volume of non-decisions going to the tribunal. It doesn't just cost the city money, it costs our members a lot of money, and we would rather figure things out with the city within the prescribed timelines. And, you know, there's a lot of process application improvements that we think could be made with the planning department, and we're happy to continue those discussions with the city.
Supplemental, if I may. I'm not on the planning committee, Chair, and I'm not asking to be invited. But what I have noticed is the vast majority of non-decision applications that have gone to the Ontario Lands Tribunal, staff are indicating that the application was not complete, that the application still had information that they were waiting for, and instead of getting that information to them so that staff could make the decision, the developers know they can just jump to the OLT. So can I get a comment on that, please?
Delegate Collins Williams?
Through the chair, I'm not quite sure I follow. The clock doesn't start until the application is deemed complete in terms of hitting that deadline for appeal to the tribunal. Now, a private sector applicant can make an appeal if they disagree with the city in terms of whether an application is being deemed complete, but as far as I know, the timeline does not end at that non-decision point. You have to have a complete application for the clock to even start.
And yet we had an application in Upper Stony Creek where they launched a non-decision appeal before it actually even came to the committee here. It was supposed to be there 2 days later, but they jumped in advance. And so the challenge that I'm having is I'm hearing the arguments from the building community. And in my time on this council, I have seen tremendous changes in the process that the planning department follows in order to expedite decisions to the best of their abilities. And yet I keep hearing the complaint that it's not good enough. And that's why I'm simply asking, what's not good enough? Tell us exactly what we should be changing. And then we can consider that. But I don't see that request. I see, with respect, not meaning to disparage, rhetorical statements from the building community, but I still haven't received, this is what you could do to improve the system so the city can make those decisions. And that's all I'm asking.
Through the chair, I would be happy to meet with the councillor offline to have a more direct conversation with very specific recommendations.
I appreciate that, even though I'm not on the planning committee. Thank you.
That welcome mat's always out, Councillor. I have Councillor Pauls next, please.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you said about that in 2024 we had 1,860 home, and that's a big drop. But you also said the condos was 285. Why do you think condos, I don't think it's only our city, are not being built fast enough, or it's gone, the people do not want condos? Does it cost more to build a condo than actual houses?
Through the chair, I agree this is not just a City of Hamilton issue on the high-rise intensification side. The numbers have utterly collapsed in Vancouver and Toronto as well, although the Hamilton numbers are particularly bad as a percentage decline. The investor component of the market has completely vacated the markets. The cost to actually build and produce a high-rise unit exceeds what the market is willing to pay, and the bottom has completely fallen out. The banks have changed the financing requirements the last couple of years. In particular, the last year, it used to be you had to get around 70% pre-sales in order to have construction financing advanced. High-rise construction has now been determined by the banks to be so risky with the number of projects going under and frankly builders going under that they're pretty risk adverse to lending money towards high-rise intensification projects. So the pre-sales numbers are much higher, and the investors aren't there, so the financing is not being extended.
You know, I heard one of the builders say to build a condo now in an apartment would cost about $65,000 extra just to get a permit to do it. So I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. And I want to get your opinion. Even though we want good build, we want to make sure the building are climate standard. Do you think this extra golden climate standard made a big difference?
Just a reminder, all comments and questions through the chair. Delegate?
Through the chair, I'm so sorry. Through the chair.
Through the chair, the Ontario Building Code was just updated on January 1st, 2025. I believe there are around 5,000 changes to the code. It's one of the most significant code updates of the last couple of decades. The province is working to harmonize with the tiered step code with the federal government. So there's a lot of changes that the industry is trying to adapt to. I think we're straying a little bit from budget discussions, but the City of Hamilton does have a proposed set of green development standards. There are some challenges with that, and it's not necessarily specific to Hamilton, but there are 444 different municipalities in Ontario, and we are challenged in that, you know, if you build a Ford truck in Oakville, it should be the same truck that's built in Ottawa or Windsor in terms of the standards. We're challenged in that there are builders and developers that build in multiple jurisdictions, but the products that we order, whether it's furnaces, windows, all of the appliances in the home, are usually built on by multinational or national companies. So having 444 different sets of rules is a challenge.
Thank you for that, Mike. And I could see the house market really going down, even though they're still high, but there are a lot less homes being built. So thank you for the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McMeekin.
To my good friend Mike here, a couple of thoughts occur to me. You mentioned different municipalities doing things ostensibly better than we're doing here in Hamilton. And you mentioned a lot of issues around that drive up the price of housing, like bank charges, supply side issues, labor costs, materials costs. We don't control a lot of those at the municipal level, as you know. Changes to the code, that's an ongoing problem. As long as I can recall, at least the last decade, it's been a struggle to harmonize anything, right? We have a harmonized tax, but that's about the end of the harmonization. So two specific questions, three specific questions. What portion of the total cost of a housing unit can be attributed to government fees, building permits, all that sort of stuff?
Through the chair, the Altus Group does a national benchmarking study from coast to coast, from St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria, BC. They look at all of the government-imposed charges at the municipal, provincial, and federal level for the top 25 municipalities across the country. We're expecting a 2024 report to be released end of February, early March, so we'll have more specific and current numbers. Typically throughout the GTA and Hamilton, depending on the municipality and the product type, it's between 25 and 30% are directly attributed to taxes, fees, and charges. So that ranges from at the provincial and federal level, GST, HST, land transfer tax, and then when you get down to the local level, development charges, community benefits charges, cash in lieu of parkland, et cetera. So 25 to 30% is taxes.
That's a lot of money. Okay, so I'd be interested in your comments on development charges. I can recall a conversation we had not that long ago where our senior staff were expressing concerns about our competitiveness if we were to escalate those fees too much. Is that a problem? How do we compare with development charges to, say, Burlington?
Depends which direction up the highway you go. So Hamilton's charges are certainly much higher than Brantford, St. Catharines, anywhere in Niagara region. Hamilton's are more competitive than a lot of those in the GTA, although things are starting to shift. The city of Burlington lowered their development charges the last time around, whereas Hamilton increased theirs by around 30%. And just prior to Christmas, Mayor Del Duca significantly, very significantly cut the city of Vaughan's development charges. And I know from discussions within the industry that there are a number of other GTA municipalities taking a good hard look at reducing their charges. I also recognize that infrastructure needs to get built, so there needs to be stronger partnerships with the provincial and federal governments. Once upon a time, there was more growth-related infrastructure being funded by senior levels of government. I'm also challenged by the notion of growth pays for growth. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have no idea what that means anymore because the definition of what growth pays for growth seems to be constantly changing. In Kitchener, they just funded a massive $100 million plus sports facility with Olympic swimming pools and soccer fields and all sorts of great stuff, but it's available to everyone in the community, yet it was paid for entirely by development charges. So I don't know what growth pays for growth means.
Okay, my final question, and I don't want to sound cheeky here, but I think it's worth asking. Is there anything the city of Hamilton is doing that the builders like?
The downtown community improvement plan with the reductions to try to attract intensification in the downtown core has been very helpful. The Erase Brownfields remediation program is, I think, a leader in terms of the entire country, in terms of the city having a program in place to incentivize investment in brownfield redevelopment. That being said, Hamilton has a little more, I'll call it industrial heritage and history than some other municipalities in terms of some of the challenges in the downtown core. And some of the pre-zoning work around the LRT has been very helpful. And lastly, Hamilton was a leader in terms of the secondary or accessory dwelling units. A lot of other municipalities are catching up or surpassing, but that's an area that Hamilton has historically been a leader in, and I'd like to see the city continue to show leadership in that area.
Thank you.
We're at time. Thank you. Mayor Horvath.
Thanks very much, Chair Wilson. Just a couple of quick questions through you. The first is there's a project that's been underway for about a year. It's about to begin pilot processes around some of the concerns that the delegate raised in terms of the speed at which things get done or not get done when it comes to projects going through the review process. And I just want to ask if the delegate is aware of some of the Bloomberg Harvard work that's been done and aware of the pilot projects that are going to begin piloting next year, and there are two, and they were specifically put together to address some of the process issues that had been identified for me when I first became the mayor. Is the delegate aware of those pilot projects and that process that we engaged a number of builders and developers in and other stakeholders?
Through the chair, yes, I'm aware, and our association's aware of the pilots. Would love to learn some of the more of the specifics and details as we approach the pilot project timelines, and looking forward to that. And hopefully, if pilots are successful, pilots are implemented on a broader scale.
Thanks. I would through you, I would agree with that. I think the message was clear, and I believe that we've had some really interesting conversations with the sector, as well as with our staff who've stepped up to do some exciting innovation and granted pilots, but getting at some of those concerns that have been raised. And so happy to hear. I do know that the West End Home Builders Association was part of the consultation process, so I'm happy about that. By the way, the report came to us on December 23rd, the update report. If Kelsers hadn't had a chance to have a look, I think it might be interesting to see where things are with that. The other question I have through you, Chair, is it's just the issue around two-tier versus one-tier in development charges. I know that you the delegate mentioned two particular cities, I think it was Vaughan and Burlington, both of which are parts of regional government. And so the changes made by at the lower tier level, when compared to the overall DCs that are all in lower tier, upper tier in two-tier municipalities, does the delegate have any kind of information available right at this moment to make that comparison? So if Vaughan reduces development charges significantly, what does it look like when it's when the I think it's York region that Vaughan is part of, when those are added up and compared to Hamilton, and similarly Burlington and Halton, because it's really apples to oranges, if I may, through you, Madam Chair. It's apples to oranges when we're looking at a two-tier municipalities and two sets of development charges versus a single-tier municipality, in my humble opinion, and I may be incorrect, but can I get through you, Chair, any sense of what that looks like?
Through the chair, I don't have the spreadsheets in front of me with every GTA municipality's development charges, but yes, Vaughan is part of the lower tier of York region, and there are different responsibilities assigned to the upper tiers and lower tiers. Throughout the GTA, the regional governments have some of the larger trunk infrastructure as it relates to water and wastewater. The same would go for Burlington and Halton regions. So these are a couple lower tiers that have showed leadership in terms of sharpening their pencils and taking the opportunity or looking for opportunities to reduce the charges, but it is just the lower tier. In terms of apples to oranges comparison, I don't want to debate, but I would just Hamilton is a single tier, and it's essentially the responsibilities of the upper tier and the lower tier put together in one level of government. So yes, it's a different system, but ultimately all of the different inputs are the same inputs that Hamilton's responsible for. It's just through the two tiers. So you have a case in other jurisdictions where the lower tiers have made changes to reduce DCs, and at this stage in time, the upper tiers did not.
Thanks through you, Madam Chair. Just an observation that, in fact, we are responsible for trunk sewers and those kinds of things at the single tier municipalities. And I would just also I would also ask that if there's any difference with the comparisons, and I'll wrap up with this question, the comparisons that get made with older municipalities versus new growth municipalities. And again, we not only have new growth to address as a single tier municipality, we have what we both kind of described, the delegate and myself, as having responsibility for the lower tier and upper tier kinds of infrastructure necessary to grow a community and to build a great community. But we also, as an older city, have the extra challenge of very old, decaying infrastructure that's on its last legs that also needs to be replaced on top of the new infrastructure that's necessary for growth. And so any comment that I could get from the delegate on that, please?
Through the chair, I'll make two comments. One of the interesting comments made by Mayor Stephen Del Duca with the Vaughan situation was, and they took a different approach than Burlington. Burlington took the approach of looking at very specific projects and seeing what was going to get built in the 10-year time frame and what was not. And they looked at a couple projects in years 8, 9, and 10 and thought, realistically, this is not going to get built, so we're not going to put it in this DC background study. Mayor Vaughan took a very different approach which was that despite increasing development charges, their revenue was going down each and every year because of the lack of housing starts, and he was looking at a go-forward basis, and 50% of nothing is still nothing. So their concern there was that overall they were going to have a lot less revenue coming in, and they're trying to incentivize intensification and more growth so that they can actually get the money flowing again. So it was just two very different approaches. In terms of the age of the city of Hamilton, you've got some combined sewers and some, in your words, some decaying infrastructure. That definitely does provide a different set of circumstances, something that, frankly, the senior levels of government should have a stronger role in terms of supporting some of those much needed upgrades. In terms of the allocation towards growth versus non-growth, I think there could be a healthy technical debate of, well, what is attributed to new growth and what is a benefit to existing? Is the infrastructure that is decaying, how much of that should be attributed to new home buyers buying condos and them having to pay for it versus the entire community or the existing residents of Hamilton? And given what we're seeing with housing starts, there's not a whole lot of growth coming to downtown Hamilton, and there might not be for a while.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Mayor Horvath. Does that exhaust your questions? Okay, thank you. And just as chair, I am allowed to allude to facts. 25 years ago, 75 cents on the dollar was for upper tier infrastructure. The very things Mayor Horvath was talking about. I suspect that amount has grown since construction costs have grown by 30% in the last less than decade. Councillor Kassar.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Wilson. Just one clarification question on going back to the planning process that Councillor Clark and the Mayor spoke to. So the delegate indicated that the processes in Hamilton need to be improved. So question, have those needed improvements been put to senior staff, and if so, in planning, and if so, what was the response? Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, we have ongoing dialogue with senior staff in the city of Hamilton. I would say that it's a healthy relationship of, we don't always agree on everything, but there is a professional, healthy relationship in terms of ongoing dialogue. We continue to present ideas to the city of Hamilton and through the Development Industry Liaison Group and other opportunities that dialogue does continue. So overall, I think it's a positive relationship, but from our perspective, more needs to get done. And this isn't just the city of Hamilton, this is throughout Ontario, and part of the responsibility here lies on the provincial government getting its house in order in terms of the legislative and regulatory framework. But perhaps I'm coming to the table today with a little more edge than usual, and that is because things are bad out there. There are going to be a lot of job losses in our sector in the next couple of years, in particular on the high-rise intensification side. And we're also in a housing crisis, and we frankly need to be building more for the future of Hamilton and the residents of Hamilton. And the edge comes from a place of frustration that things are very bad out there right now.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, thank you for the response. And I think there's many things that we can't control. Process is one of them. So I think we should be putting effort into finding out where there is mutual agreement on process improvements. So for future discussion, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor McMeekin for a second time, but before going to second time, any first time speakers? We're exhausted that? Okay. Councillor McMeekin.
Yeah, one more question, Mike, and Councillor Kassar almost precisely asked what I want to ask, so thank you for that. It has to do with process. It's clear from listening to you today and in recent meetings that there's a lot of discussion and conversation we need to be having. We talk about homelessness here as an all of Hamilton approach because there's not very much coming from the senior levels of government, and we're picking up the cost of that, as you know, by and large. It occurs to me as one who's had a foot at a different level in here, that The real problem is we don't have an all-of-government approach around anything from building codes to how we're going to deal with supply chain issues to living wage concerns and God forbid a 25% tariff on products that may be coming north and the potential trade war that could set off. I don't think that's going to help the building industry at all. I remember the softwood lumber fights we had and won eventually, but it took 7 years to do that. So I'm wondering, are there enhancements to the mechanism, the process that would allow us without prejudice to come together and to have more fulsome conversations about how we're all in this together and need a together response to make things happen?
Through the chair, we really do need, all three levels of government, private sector, nonprofit sector to be coming to the table together for solutions. And whether it's a private sector builder or a nonprofit builder, we're all going through the same regulatory process. And Hamilton has shown a lot of leadership on the nonprofit side and investments into affordable housing. But I would remind members of the committee that market rate housing accounts for about 95% of Hamilton's residential housing. And to solve the housing crisis, we do need to work on that side of the equation too. Otherwise, you're sort of continuing to add water to an overfilled bucket without plugging the hole in the bottom. And it's creating an environment where those who can afford to leave do, and Hamilton's left with a growing population and issues at the bottom end of the market, which you don't have the resources to fully help with. And there's lots of things that we can do together. And just I'll throw one example. I think with AI and information technology, there's other municipalities. Kelowna does their building permits all automatically through AI in terms of building code compliance. This might be more on the province than the city of Hamilton, but we've got 444 municipalities in Ontario. There should be similar submission. What are the studies required for a complete application that was alluded to some of the challenges earlier? And I recognize that there are unique circumstances for, a particular application in Sudbury versus a particular application in Hamilton. But, why is the list of studies so drastically different for a similar project, be it in Hamilton or Caledon? So I think there is a role perhaps for the province and municipalities working together to have greater levels of consistency, perhaps a one-window approach using information technology, that it's the same system that an application is being made in Toronto or Ottawa or Hamilton. I think perhaps, don't let a good crisis go to waste. There are opportunities to streamline the system and build greater levels of consistency and have a stronger role for the province to create a level playing field throughout the province and fund you guys better.
So if the necessity is the mother of invention, is the old phrase, sometimes a crisis can be used to our advantage to move things forward. I would respectfully suggest through you, Chair, that any advice you may have to our senior leadership team through either the planning team or the mayor's office that might enhance our ability to talk to one another and to preemptively anticipate some of the challenge or even retroactively respond to them would be an invitation, an open invitation I think we'd want to extend to you.
Thank you, Councillor McMeekin.
That's it. Thanks.
Councillor Clark, please, for a second time.
Thank you. And Chair, just a couple more questions, and I think it will help both the council and our staff. So Mike has intimated that some of the challenges that the developers are experiencing now are more economic in nature, in terms of banks, lines of credits, cost for surety bonds, banks not willing to lend money out unless they have a pro forma that meets their value. You've touched on that with regards to multi-residential properties. And so is it possible just to get a good understanding of what the impacts are? Because what I've heard, and is purely anecdotal, is that there have already been significant layoffs in the construction industry in Hamilton. And I know from experience in my ward, I have developments that everything's lined up, but they're not moving forward because of the fiscal challenges to get them across the finish line. And I, again, have heard anecdotally, not from many companies operating in Hamilton, but in the GTA, there's been a number of bankruptcies for companies that are doing multi-residential. So what's the economic experience currently in Hamilton for the building trades, the developers? What's really happening that is causing such challenges for the developers? And I hope that's a fair question to ask.
Through the chair, it's not always easy to separate out one municipality when we're in a broader market regional area. We are in a regional market with Toronto and the GTA, and there are aspects in Hamilton that are very attached to that regional market, and then there's no real national housing market, but there are obvious connections to other major metropolitan areas. In terms of a quick soundbite on what's happening in Hamilton, and some of the immediate surrounding area, the only sales that are happening is there's some movement in the low-rise, be it singles, semis, and townhomes. That's the only segment of the market where there's any end-user traffic even showing up in sales offices. People aren't launching high-rise projects. I'm not going to name the name of the developer, but there's a major project in downtown Hamilton that the last time they sold a unit was July. The sales office is open. You can go buy a unit today, but they haven't sold anything in 6 or 7 months. Some of these projects are going to get canceled. Some may shift over to purpose-built rental. There's been some movement on the purpose-built rental side. CMHC has the CMHC Select program, which has helped with the financing. And the federal government made some very positive moves to the HST as it applies to rental housing. So there's been some fundamental shifts on how the economics work with purpose-built rental. In terms of the high-rise ownership market, I mean, it's deader than dead. I mean, we're going back to 1995 or 1996 in terms of the last time it was this bad. Things may get worse before they get better. The investors have completely vacated the market. I don't know if they're coming back anytime soon, let alone ever. And when the market finally does start to turn on the high rise, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's going to turn in Vancouver and downtown Toronto long before it turns in downtown Hamilton. So the wave will start in downtown Toronto, it will come to some other 905 municipalities, and hopefully eventually here.
Chair, may I ask for clarification about, you mentioned Vancouver. What are you referencing that's likely to come here from the Vancouver experience?
No, I'm just through the chair. In general, in terms of positive market sentiment and any investors returning, and investors are a key component of the high-rise market, you're not going to get to sales thresholds to be able to build anything substantial based on end users entirely. You know, you do have your ma and pa small-time investors that might invest in project X or Y in a community closer to home, but in terms of anything substantial, it would be downtown Toronto and downtown Vancouver that start to move first in terms of that macroeconomic market sentiment shift in terms of the Canadian real estate market.
Last question, if I may. And your speculation is based on what? What's the challenge in downtown Hamilton?
Through the chair, through the condo boom of the last couple of decades, it started in, Toronto attracts worldwide capital and interests. And on the backs of that, you get a lot of domestic capital and interest. I love Hamilton, but it does not have the same, it's not the same center of gravity, and a huge component of it is also higher order transit in terms of subway lines, LRT lines that are actually built, let alone under construction, and what Hamilton does have going for it now is all-way two-way GO service, hopefully electrification, and hopefully in the coming years an LRT line under construction. But the capital tends to follow higher order transit, and we're not there yet. And it goes without saying downtown Hamilton is experiencing some other challenges at the moment that there might not be a lot of confidence in terms of capital investment.
Thank you. I appreciate the candor because this is information that we do need to know in terms of the financial impacts and the challenges that the developers are experiencing. It's not just the local guy who's going out to buy a house, but the mortgage rate's too high. There's implications right across the economy on the larger developers. So thank you for the latitude, Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And before we go to Mayor Horvath, I just wanted to say to my colleagues, there's a lot of entanglement in this delegation. It's a lot of it is referencing processes and approvals, which are outside the budget per se, although there is a budget impact in terms of our local economy and our ability and our capacity to grow our assessment that affects our budget. So I am affording some latitude, but I just want to remind folks that this is a budget presentation, and I trust the delegate will be reminded of that as well. Thank you. Mayor Horvath.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. And with that guidance, I want to just assure the delegate that, in fact, the AI issue around using AI to assist with the process of applications and the information is one of the pilots that we're working on from the Bloomberg. So I can send you the report if you want it. I'm sure you've seen it. Thank you.
Very good news. Thank you. Thank you, Delegate, for your attention and your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Delegate Lee Fairbanks, please, in person. Just a reminder of the 5-minute mark. A bell will go off when you're into the last minute of your presentation.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak today. Before I start, I'd like to personally thank all the councillors and the mayor for their courage in running for office and their work every day on behalf of all the citizens of Hamilton. I don't think you get enough credit for what you do, and I'm a big supporter. It's a massive job, and I think I like to take every opportunity to thank you for that. I'm here today to talk to you about a plan to plant 1 million trees in the city in 5 years and save $135 million in doing it. Now, I should point out that you have already approved 1 million trees. You may not have realized it, but this year you instructed staff to plant 20,000 trees a year, and over 50 years that will be 1 million trees. I'm going to show you how to do that in 5 years. The current budget for the 50-year program is $150 million, so I'm going to show you how you can do that for $15 million or less. Now, having said that, through the chair, I can't show you this in 5 minutes. It's impossible. I've run through this presentation many times. It's about 18 minutes. I see that some of your 5-minute presentations end up as 30-minute question and answer periods, but I'll assure you, if you allow me to do the full presentation, there'll be very few questions left to ask because I will be covering all the questions. This is a 2-year project that I've been working on with councillor staff, environmental groups, and the general public, and I'm speaking really on behalf of 600,000 people today. So if I could ask through the chair for a motion for time to do the full presentation today rather than coming back and doing it in 5-minute sections.
Thank you. That you're right. That permission must be sought and granted by this committee. And to your point, you have delegated previously, and I know you've had individual meetings with members of council. So it is on the permission has to be provided by council. Councillor Pauls, you're moving.
It's been a long time.
My apologies.
I was wondering if we just give an extra 5 minutes, like we said, if you can. Will be less questions. I will go for that. So we'll get 10 minutes. How long did you say you wanted?
If I speak really quickly, it's probably 18.
I think we should go for 10 because.
Okay, so an extra 5 has been granted.
An extra 5, if
May
we
I have,
can.
do you have a seconder for that permission? Councillor Jackson, as you can appreciate, we have a number of public who are
Yes, I
making time
understand.
out of their day.
Thank you. I will give you the first 10 minutes, and then you can decide where you want to go from there.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, hold on a
Then we
second.
got a show of hands.
So that approval has to be granted in the form of an electronic vote. Thank you, Councillor Jackson.
Okay, thank you. If I could ask everybody in the room.
If you
to
could
s-
just wait until we have to record
Oh,
the
thank
vote
you.
and the approval.
Sorry.
Thank you. And that the chair will recognize you at the start so that we can also time it appropriately.
Thanks.
Thumbs up from me.
Councillor Francis, are you able to vote? Thank you. So, sorry, because of the presentation, we're not able to share the screen. It carried by a vote of 10 to 1. Thank you.
An extra 5 minutes is yours. Please go ahead, Delegate Fairbanks.
Thank you very much. If I could ask everybody to take a couple of deep breaths before we begin, just breathe in with me. Out, in, out. The reason I'm asking you to do this is I want you to understand that we are all in this together because we're all breathing the same air. It doesn't matter if you're a council or if you're a staff. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a patient. It doesn't matter if you're, it doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter your gender, your race, religion, it doesn't matter what ward you live in. We're all breathing the same air. And we're all living in the same climate change emergency situation. So I'm going to focus on we, and I'm going to focus on air. Climate change is not a ward-specific concern, it's a citywide concern. Now, many of you will remember I was here in October talking about a similar plan to get started with a pilot project in a park, but it turns out the parks are ward-specific. And so the idea of affecting a citywide issue with a ward-specific plan just simply wasn't going to work. So I've now adjusted that to be a city-specific concern, citywide concern, which is the air. The other thing that I'd like to address is who is making these decisions, because when I first started this project almost 2 years ago, I spoke to councillors and they said, this is a great project, we need to have this happen. Talk to staff, they're the ones that make the decisions, they're the ones that decide how we're going to deal with this. So I went to staff and I proposed it to them and they said to me, we can't make that decision, only council can make that decision. So I was caught in a catch-22 where I've got councillors and staff both saying neither of them could make the decision and both pointing fingers at the other person. So we need to decide who's going to make this decision. Now, I've worked with these departments. So basically, my understanding on climate change is that public works staff will respond to direct instruction from council, not from the public and not from individual councillors. And Cynthia Graham, the director of the department, told me quite specifically, she said, this is a council concern. If you want to make these changes, you need to have council make the decision and give us clear instruction as to what to do, how to change things. So I'm here first and foremost to clarify the context that this decision I'm asking you today can only be made by the people in this chamber. You cannot send it back to staff because they've already said they can't make the decision. So I think that's important context. So let's talk about the air that we're all breathing, that we all share. How bad is it? Well, it turns out there's 186 premature deaths in the city every year from air pollution-related concerns and over 700 hospital admissions. Compare that 186 deaths with the number of homicides and vehicle fatalities, and you'll know we spend an inordinate amount of time and money trying to reduce homicides and vehicle fatalities, but very little money, if any, on trying to reduce the 186 premature deaths from air pollution. Overall in the city, there's 600,000 people here. Nearly 20,000 of them are going to die from air. So I think it's a very important issue that we need to address, and we can do that. When you compare that to COVID, for instance, 700 Hamiltonians dying from COVID, this is a massive health issue, and yet we turn the city upside down to try to prevent COVID issues. We're doing very little, if anything, for air pollution. The city does study air pollution every year, and this is from their 2024 statistics. Our air quality was at moderate or above average risks, high risk 14% of the time, twice as often as the rest of Hamilton. Our sulfur dioxide levels exceeded the criteria for acute health effects. Our fine particulate matter also exceeded the provincial safety level. Our sulfur dioxide exceeded the criteria 169 times last year, the highest number in Ontario. Hamilton and Windsor were the only two cities in the province that recorded particulate matter above safe levels. The number of Hamiltonians living with asthma is over 80,000. Hamilton has the worst air in Ontario, the worst air. So if we could all take another deep breath, I think you'll understand that we're all in this together and we all need to address this. We all need to get in the same boat and row in the same direction. The economic cost to Hamilton, according to the OMA, is $1 billion a year. If we were just to reduce this air pollution by 10%, we could save $100 million annually. So it's a massive, massive expensive problem that we have. Now, nature provides a balance. We breathe in oxygen. We absorb the oxygen. It mixes with carbon. We breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants and vegetation absorb the carbon dioxide, keep the carbon, and release the oxygen. This balance has been going on for 3 million years. But what's happened is that the world is out of balance now. We have a massive increase in population, and with the Industrial Revolution, we've created pollution sources that never existed ever before. Meanwhile, our population has gone up 16 times. We now have 8 billion people instead of 500 million breathing the air, and we've lost a third of our forest to counteract that climate change effect. The U.S. National Park Service says that urban forests are the only way we can solve this. Our city is surrounded by farms. We can't reforest the farms. So the only way we can deal with this is to build the forest inside the urban boundaries, which is what I'm proposing. We simply need more vegetation. This, I think, is the most significant slide I can show you. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see the urban canopy map, which you've seen, various shades of green. The one on the left comes from a worldwide asthma study. And those various colors of orange show the density of inhalable particles. Those are the particles that can go directly into your lungs and cause health damage. And you can see naturally that the north end, which is the industrial zone, has dark orange. But if you look at wards 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8, they're much higher than the wards 5, 9, 10, 12, 14. And if you look at the tree coverage, you'll see that they directly correlate. So if we could turn that map on the right solid green, we would reduce all those particles in the air that everybody breathes. And all of us breathe all the air. The air doesn't respect ward boundaries. Most of us drove through 3 or 4 wards to get here, and we go back and forth to shop and work and so on. So if we can make that tree coverage equitable, which it's not currently, we can have a dramatic increase in reducing pollutions and reducing deaths here in the city of Hamilton. Now, you've laid the foundation already. You've passed the climate change emergency, the urban canopy study, the biodiversity action plan. What's missing is a citywide plan to make it happen. And that's what I'm here for. Our canopy today is 20%. You can see how we relate to the other major cities in Canada. We're quite low. The council approved a goal of 40% canopy. So how do we get there? I think the Sudbury situation is one of the most interesting, because we know what Sudbury's like. They've planted 10 million trees in the last 44 years. They average 227,000 trees a year, and we're saying we're going to plant 20,000. We're not going to make a dent on this situation at 20,000 trees a year. The current plan, 20,000 trees per year times 50 years is 1 million trees at $150 million. The plan I'm bringing to you today is 200,000 trees per year for 5 years for 1 million trees at $15 million instead of 150. 4 key budget areas. First is reduction in mowing to reduce greenhouse gases. Second is to plant trees in parks instead of along the roadsides. Third is to plant in a biodiversity habitat so they have a high rate of survival and can live longer and reseed. And the fourth is to redeploy horticultural staff from flowers to trees. So reduction in mowing, if we reduce mowing by 50%, we can remove emissions equivalent to 5,000 cars every year for 50% reduction. How do we do that? First of all, we can adjust our mowing according to usage of playing fields and the growing season, which is dormant all summer long. And that will reduce by 25%. Then if we can plant trees in clusters instead of a single row, you see the row on the left is the way staff plant their trees now, and they have to mow around every one of those trees, very time consuming. If you plant them in a cluster or you fill in all those gaps between trees, they can make one run down the side and down the other, and they'll reduce mowing. If we plant those million trees in clusters, we'll reduce mowing by another 25%. So simply by a couple of adjustments, we can reduce by 50%. Now, the second part is to plant trees in parks instead of roadsides. I've shown you this slide before. Roughly 100% of trees have to be replaced every 25 years. If you look at the picture, in the front left foreground, you'll see a street tree that's probably been there 15 to 20 years. The next one that's that size is far down the sidewalk, and the three in between have been planted recently to replace the ones that died. So that's what's happened. On the right-hand side of the sidewalk, that's a city lot, Works Department lot. And that's a naturalized area where you can see the trees there are maybe 75 to 100 years old. They have biodiversity support. That's what we want to do. We want to plant that kind of planting in our parks instead of the roadsides where we're just turning over. Those 25 years of trees that you plant, you're going to replace them all with the second 25 years. You won't actually be gaining any more canopy. We can also plant smaller trees in natural habitats in parks. And I estimate we can plant 20 small trees in the same time as one street tree. So it wouldn't cost any more labor to actually plant smaller trees in habitat than it would to go and plant one bigger tree in a big hole all the way down the city. We can buy 20 small trees for the same price as one street tree. So instead of buying 10,000 street trees at $200 each, we can buy 200,000 small trees at $10 each for the same $2 million per year. And we're working with these trees all the time. These are the trees we give away in the free street tree program and the ones we plant in mini forests. So we have the experience. If we plant in a biodiversity habitat, they'll grow 10 times faster. So they'll quickly catch up with the bigger trees that we were going to plant in the street trees. We'll have that canopy faster. This diagram is from Paul O'Hara, and I strongly recommend the city hire him to coordinate this because it's specific expertise to renaturalize a field or a lawn to turn it into a biodiverse area with trees. Fourth step is to redeploy horticulture. Staff grew 273,000 annuals in 2021. If we have them plant 273,000 trees instead, we wouldn't actually have to buy any trees. We could grow our own million trees.
Thank you, Delegate Fairbank. That is at
three more slides.
10-minute mark. I'm sorry, I'm at the will of this committee, and the direction has been granted. Are there any questions? Councillor Clark, please.
I'm just curious if his calculations included the trees that are planted through the Hamilton Conservation Authority and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority in the watershed of Hamilton.
Through the chair, no, I'm talking about the million trees that the city's agreed to plant. I'm just redirecting those million trees into a different program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. I don't see any speakers online, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Next up, we have Delegate Jen Baker from the Hamilton Naturalist Club. Good afternoon.
Hello. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me here today to share some comments for your consideration, because I know you need more as you're going through this budget process. So I'm Jen Baker, General Manager with the Hamilton Naturalist Club. And for those who aren't familiar, the HNC is a 106-year-old charitable organization with over 600 members dedicated to the study, appreciation, and conservation of our wild plants and animals. So really, that means we're centered around protecting and enhancing biodiversity in urban and rural areas. So for the last 10 years, we've been creating pollinator habitats across the city, working with HNC volunteers, community members, and conservation partners. And over time, that led to the collaborative development of Hamilton's first Biodiversity Action Plan, which Council approved in June. So as you know, addressing the interrelated crises of biodiversity loss and climate change is a fundamental imperative that everyone needs to participate in. A healthy environment is key to the long-term sustainability and well-being of Hamilton and can provide enormous environmental, social, and economic benefits. So HNC and our partners developed the Biodiversity Action Plan to protect and restore our biodiversity. So now we're working on the even more important part, which is doing the work that all of us had committed to do. So the collaborative nature of the BAP means that we'll be working to accomplish all of these things more effectively and more efficiently because we're working together, sharing our expertise, things like that. And so for HNC, this includes to continue to maintain and expand our pollinator habitats in the city. We've been stewarding the urban forest in Captain Cornelius Park for several years, and we're now in discussions with forestry to take that model and look at stewarding other urban forests with new community volunteers. And I have a few funding asks out to do this work. Today, I'm here to talk about HNC's support for the staffing request made in the BAP staff report. The report did a really good job of outlining the what and the why staff need to make the commitments the city has committed to through the BAP. So the staff just need extra help to be able to do these commitments. And I really want to emphasize, so the staff we've been working with, and there's a lot over the last number of years, are super committed to biodiversity enhancement, to the actions in the BAP, but they need some help. They're all stretched really thin, so they need some help, but that doesn't diminish their dedication. So the planning department has asked for additional staff person to work on the planning commitments in the BAP, along with BAP-related projects the city's already interested in, like the Natural Areas Inventory, the Natural Areas Acquisition Fund, the 30 by 30, and then the ongoing review of policies for natural heritage. Public Works has asked for 4 full-time positions to support the BAP, to allow the continued involvement in BAP coordination, and then undertake the actions, the Public Works actions. So this includes things like supporting actions in the Watershed Action Plan that relate to BAP, and that's really looking at the nature-based solutions part of the Watershed Action Plan. So that's kind of looking how nature can help to manage our water. There's also green space enhancement, so part of that can include, with extra support, groups like the HNC, Green Venture, other community groups can be able to do more. If there's additional staff support, we can all do more on the ground without having staff have to do all of it. So those, from all of these benefits from all of us working together. And just a quick reminder, so the BAP has been developed over more than 5 years with $22,000 from ArcelorMittal Dofasco and $20,000 from the city's water department, and then uncountable hours from all of the partners. So this demonstrates we're committed to this. Now we're into the more important phase of implementation and getting her done. And the whole reason the BAP was developed. And we need some additional support to do this. I talked about the importance of healthy biodiversity for a healthy community, and I asked Council to support staff's request for some help with BAP implementation, something that the community is depending on and frankly waiting for, and that will help the whole community far, far into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Baker. Are there any questions of the delegate? Councillor Kassar.
Thank you, Chair Wilson. And just to maybe summarize and clarify, so last year this council approved the Biodiversity Action Plan, and it was put together with the city and a whole bunch of partners in the community. And what's in the 2025 budget is some staffing that is going to leverage all the efforts and the hours put in by several community partners. Is that a fair summary of what you were saying?
That is one of the things that could happen with additional support, yes.
Okay, thank you.
There are no further questions for you. Thank you for your delegation and taking the time out of your day.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Next up, we have Delegate Greg Tenant of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce here in person. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody, and a job well done by Delegate Baker. We go to the same CrossFit gym, and we are legally required to mention that we go to a CrossFit gym as part of our presentations. Good afternoon, all committee members, and as always, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. For 180 years, the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce has been the leading voice of Hamilton businesses. Today, we proudly represent over 1,000 member organizations that employ more than 75,000 people across our city. As President and CEO of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, it is my absolute privilege to speak on behalf of our vibrant and diverse business community. As you deliberate on the 2025 budget, I want to frame today's discussion with a key point regarding the city's achieving its vision to be the best place to raise a child and age successfully. There is work to be done. Hamilton was recently ranked 56 on the Globe and Mail's list of Canada's most livable cities. I don't offer that up as a criticism, but rather to highlight the importance of making smart strategic investments that will position Hamilton as a great place to live, work, and play today and into the future. To achieve that objective, the Chamber supports critical investments in infrastructure, affordable housing, and public safety. These are all vital to our city's growth and resilience. However, we must also express caution and share our concerns over the proposed 6.3 property tax increase. While in line with provincial trends, this increase will place additional strain on Hamilton businesses and families. It is also important to note that Hamilton's economy faces new economic challenge and risks since the budget process began. That includes an increase in unemployment rates year over year, as well as the potential of U.S. tariffs that will impact our economy. These impacts are going to be felt significantly here in Hamilton and in our manufacturing sector, which supports over 28,000 jobs in our city, 20% higher than the national benchmark. So as we go through this process, these challenges demand a balanced approach to budget management to ensure that we invest in our future while minimizing the tax burden on Hamilton businesses and households. We continue to recommend that the city look at all ways to reduce the tax burden, and this may include making the difficult decisions to remove programs and initiatives that no longer benefit our community. In my remaining time, I do want to highlight several key areas of the budget and how we feel it will impact the future growth of Hamilton. When it comes to housing and in the 2025 budget, it does reflect the important investment in affordable housing. These investments are critical, and the Chamber is in support as a significant step in addressing the needs for affordable housing in our community. However, we also want to emphasize the need for investments across the entire housing spectrum to accommodate our growing population and the workforce of tomorrow. To truly address the housing crisis, the city should continue to remove bureaucratic barriers, expedite approvals, and encourage innovation solutions that get more shovels in the ground. And I'll hope that all questions were answered by Delegate Collins-Williams. When it comes to downtown, a thriving downtown is essential to a prosperous Hamilton, and I've made my thoughts pretty clear on that over the past several delegations. And we believe that investments in public health and safety are vital for not only a thriving downtown, but a prosperous Hamilton of today and going forward. Enhanced cleaning, increased police presence, and supports for emergency response will make our downtown safer and more inviting for residents, businesses, and visitors alike. We believe that a safe and revitalized downtown benefits everyone and will create opportunities for economic and social growth throughout Hamilton. We encourage the city to continue collaborating with community organizations to amplify the impacts of those investments. Critical infrastructure. Investments in infrastructure are critical, as critical infrastructure would indicate, to Hamilton's long-term economic growth, and the LRT project is at the cornerstone of this vision. Offering a sustainable, efficient, and accessible transportation solution that connects our city. It's essential that we continue prioritizing its advancement as a key element of a connected Hamilton. Beyond LRT, ongoing investments in roads, bridges, and transit services are necessary to build a fully integrated transportation network. We will also support investments in the West Harbour and Airport Employment Growth Districts. These are important to the long-term growth of our community, unlocking future economic opportunities, creating improved access to jobs, education, and healthcare. And finally, we support the climate change initiatives within the budget as they demonstrate a strong commitment to Hamilton's net zero transition. I will note for these efforts to succeed, they must be scaled and designed to make economic sense for businesses, encouraging participation and driving meaningful progress towards sustainability. We reaffirm our support and continued partnership on these projects going forward. And so I'd like to thank you all for your time today. And as you deliberate on this budget, I ask that you carefully weigh the impacts of any potential property tax increase within the current economic climate. It will require a deft touch and a balanced approach to create an environment that promotes economic and social prosperity today, as well as a bright and resilient future for our economy and community of tomorrow. By making strategic investments in housing, safety, infrastructure, and sustainability, we are making essential decisions to secure Hamilton's future. The Chamber is here to help position our community for that success, and we thank you for your time, and have a great day. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Delegate Tenant. We have two councillors with questions thus far. Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Cassar. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a week or two ago, there was a report on the news that Canada is incurring a 67% increase in bankruptcies of businesses between this year and last year. You have expressed last time when Greg was here that there are challenges in the city of Hamilton. Do you have any statistical data other than the anecdotal information that you receive that could give us, I guess, a Polaroid, which is a very old term, shot of what the city is experiencing business-wise?
Delegate, do you need me to describe what a Polaroid is for you?
Through the chair, they've come back in, and so my daughter has one, so I am aware of what they are.
Thank you for that slight punch. Go ahead.
Through the chair, it's a fair question, and in terms of a specific one-pager, it sounds like a great thing that we could. Drina's going to cringe when I say for us to prepare. I think when you look at the overall business landscape, Councillor, I think if you. I think we can kind of just piece together stories in The Spectator and other medias to kind of paint that picture that you're looking for. We have small businesses that are struggling in our downtown. We have strong institutions that are reducing their staffing. We have, just a layering on of impacts that are negatives towards business right now, from increased costs, risks of tariffs, the ability to find well-trained talent in new areas. And we go down this list, and on top of all those impacts that came from the pandemic, and you layer them all on, and it would say, we're at a risk factor, and I think we just have to be very cognizant across the board of layering on too many straws that might ultimately break the camel's back. So where we can create opportunities to reduce the pressures on all sizes of business right now, I think it's incredibly important.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor.
Councillor Cassar.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wilson, and thanks for being here, Greg. Just a question around what you mentioned in your delegation from the outset was, increasing costs, proposed 6.3% increase, and the burden that has on taxpayers, businesses, and residential, and then also the need for investment. And that's the perpetual dilemma we have, is investing but not increasing taxes, and do it in an affordable way. So in terms of investment, in the budget report, there's capital financing, which is largely around investments you talked about, of 2.1% of the increase. And then you talked about safety. The police part of the increase is 1.1%. So that's half the increase there, and then housing and whatnot. So I think it speaks to what you were asking for in terms of investment and helping business. Are there any specific areas that you think we should be looking at within city services if we're going to peel back in order to improve affordability, but still invest in those things that you said were important? Through you, Chair.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a great question, and I think I definitely tried to articulate and highlight the areas where I think they're the biggest positive areas of investment to create long-term growth. And what I would say, and I'm going to go a little bit business nerd here, one of my favorite books is Andy Grove's High output management. He was the head of Intel for a while, and he talks all about, as leaders and as managers, it's imperative that we identify the largest lever points that create success. So when I talk to those 4 fundamental areas that would create levers to long-term success here, that's what at the Chamber we believe are the largest levers for change. In terms of cuts, respectfully, I don't have an in-depth enough budget, and the budget is significant enough that I think it's a very difficult question. I think I would, again, turn to that vision and missioning. I just, again, using my business background, okay, where do we want to go as a community, as a city? Where can we make investments that allow us to get there? And then ultimately, where are we investing funds that are no longer in line with where we're trying to go as a community? And I think those would be the areas that I would look to cut.
Councillor McMeekin.
Thanks through you. Thank you, Chair. I hear a lot of questions asked, probably because I have a couple of children who have businesses in the core, about the potential impact of the LRT on local businesses. And on some occasions, the query is, and I know you're doing something, but just maybe an update. What steps, preparations is the Chamber taking to assist businesses who may be impacted by the LRT? And
Respectfully, Councillor, is that your question?
Yes, and that is raised in the context of the economic development side of the presenters.
Well, respectfully, I know we have an LRT subcommittee that we're very, very privileged to have Delegate Tenant sit on, and we're having those discussions. If we could focus our questions on the budget per se, please.
Okay, you mentioned the need for a sound economy and economic growth. There are other factors, like the one I just mentioned, that will have some impact. How is the Chamber, how can the Chamber help businesses prepare and city prepare for the challenges ahead?
Yeah. Through the chair, I mean, we're always trying to take a future-focused look at what we can do as a community, rather than look back and be negative. I would suggest, where are we going to build out our programming for the 2025 year as we put the final touches on strategic plan. Again, it's very much in those 4 areas, specific to your question around the LRT. I can tell you that we are in constant communication with Metrolinx regarding ensuring we have an LRT-ready program up and running and ready to go once there's shovels in the grounds, and there are those direct day-to-day impacts to businesses along the corridor and throughout our community.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. There are no further questions.
Thank you all.
Next in-person delegation is, and I do apologize if I mispronounce your name, Tony, is it Wojtowicz? Wojtowicz? I'm not seeing an individual respond to that, so I will circle back at the end. Next up, Maya Hobbs, Vice President, Education, McMaster Student Union. Excuse me, yeah, only the clerk is allowed in the center of the horseshoe. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the General Issues Committee, and members of the public. My name is Maya Hobbs, and I'm the Vice President Education of the McMaster Students Union. I'm joined by Carrie Yang, our Associate Vice President of Municipal Affairs. Together, we represent 27,000 students at McMaster University. As part of our advocacy efforts, we regularly survey students on their experiences living in Hamilton through the Your City survey. Today, we will be presenting our recommendations to the city on housing, transit, harm reduction, policing, and employment. Students reside across all wards in Hamilton, yet many face unsafe or overcrowded housing conditions. According to the Your City survey, 50% of students live with 5 people or more, and 32% with 6 or more, while paying up to $1,500 per month in rent. Despite this, 58% of students support stronger landlord regulations, even if this may lead to higher rental costs. As such, we are asking the City of Hamilton to establish the landlord licensing program citywide with clear enforceable regulations and penalties on turnaround times for essential repairs to ensure a renter's right to safe housing, as well as the development of an online reporting system to report landlord abuses and rental violations, especially given the general student reluctance to pursue actions against landlords in fear of retaliation in the form of rent increases, unfair evictions, and more. As vulnerable renters, students also often are at risk during increasing periods of extreme heat in Hamilton. In recent years, the lack of cooling in rental properties has led to fatal experiences, with 22% of students reporting no AC unit, and even among those with AC units, 11% reported unreliable usage. We urge the City of Hamilton to move forward with the proposed bylaw to protect all renters.
Moving on to transit, we are recommending the City of Hamilton engage in student and community consultation on the creation of bike lanes. We're proud to live in a city that invests and supports cycling infrastructure despite the provincial regulations and restrictions that are being imposed by Bill 212. We know that 52% of students agree or strongly agree that they want better cycling infrastructure in Hamilton, even at the expense of transit or vehicle lanes. We believe that we can work together to protect the biking infrastructure, which is beneficial to our environment, our health, as well as vehicle safety. As partners in transit of the city, in fact representing 20% of the transit budget through our contract with the HSR, we also ask the City of Hamilton to expand de-escalation and conflict management training for HSS bus operators that are working very hard to get our riders safely where they need to go and to ensure safe ridership for all.
Last year, from January 1st to October 20th, there were 639 suspected opioid overdoses. We recommend that the City of Hamilton provide envelope funding for harm reduction groups and initiatives. Harm reduction is a key barrier for municipal engagement, and where investing in harm reduction initiatives will encourage students to explore the city and contribute to retaining graduates.
Moving on to policing, we'd first like to recognize the independent governance systems between the city as well as the Hamilton Police Board. We do ask the city to consider our recommendation in their discussions with Hamilton Police Services as well as their board. From our end, we know that 1 in 3 students are somewhat to highly concerned about safety while living in Hamilton. We also believe that the Hamilton Police Service has the opportunity right now to engage in meaningful consultation to bridge mistrusts and improve perceptions of safety of living in Hamilton through the body-worn camera policy that's being implemented. We also intend to delegate to the Hamilton Police Service Board to directly recommend that they engage in specific targeted consultation with campus and community groups.
Moving on to student retention, 45% of respondents in our survey stated that they will not consider staying in Hamilton after graduation, indicating a stronger efforts to retain talent by providing opportunities for new graduates, particularly within municipal governance. The City of Toronto has created an Urban Fellow program, which provides students and new graduates with meaningful work experience within the city. Given the success of Toronto's Urban Fellow program, we recommend that the City of Hamilton collaborate with Engage Hamilton to create a similar program here.
We'd like to thank Council on listening on our presentations and our recommendations today. We'd also like to give thanks to Councillors Maureen Wilson, Councillors Wang, Danko, Tadson, Councillor Alex Wilson, and Councillor McKeekin for having met with us regarding our recommendations and student concerns. We also thank all councillors, and we recognize their busy schedules, and we would be happy to continue meeting with our councillors and members of our city staff to continue these conversations and best represent student concerns. We're also very eager to share any insights we may have on the student experience through the Your City survey report, which will be coming out in the next few weeks. And we are happy to field any questions now, as well as through our emails and contact information on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no speakers. There are. Councillor McMeekin, please.
Thanks. Thank you through you, Chair. With these young ladies here, we can't let them go without them answering at least one question, in my humble opinion. Are there things that, and thank you, by the way, for taking the hour and a half or so to fill me in a little bit about what's going on at MAC and some of your concerns. The number one, I think that in a very generic way, in terms of the economic potential in the city, is how do we attract the best and brightest students to McMaster, the 14th best university in the world, and put in place the things that are needed to keep them here. And I know you were very aggressive about that. My question is to the tenant issue. Are there things that we can learn from McMaster about processes, opportunities that the student council or the university has taken to manage some of the tenant problems that you highlighted in your presentation?
Through the chair, are you looking for statistics on that?
I want to know if there's any organized process to monitor absentee landlords and the like to ensure the quality that you referenced around rental accommodation and the need for same.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I think this is well encompassed in one of our recommendations. We find that students have a hard time finding the right avenues and processes to report absentee landlords, and students also have a general fear of the repercussions they might face if they were to target their landlords, let's say in terms of unfair evictions or more absenteeism. Our recommendation is the city develops that reporting system that is more accessible and intuitive to all renters, not just students, and this will help the city as well as the right bodies to track those absentee landlords and take appropriate action against them, and this will in turn protect our renters across the city.
Thank you. That's my question, Chair.
Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this afternoon. I know that I've got a few comments on a few things that has been said, but I'm just going to focus on one because it's important to me. It's the harm reduction. Are you aware of the new program that the province wants to enact about the harm reduction and turn it into HARP, where safe and consumption site? Because as we see, we've been doing this a long time and it hasn't really worked. There's a lot more people overdosing. So are you aware of the new program?
Through the chair, we are aware of the recent regulations and changes with the province with the mandate that safe consumption sites will no longer exist and the new program that will come in place. We know the harm reduction organizations in the city who have been working hard to fix the issue have requested funding to continue their work, especially the ones that previously were safe consumption sites. And while we do continue seeing our problems within the city in terms of harm reduction, we believe that these organizations are key on one aspect to solving the problem and providing support for those who need it. But we do also recognize it's a multifaceted issue and it's not a one solution fits all.
Thank you for saying that. Can you name some of the organizations that you've been talking to about safe injection sites? Who are they?
Yes, absolutely. We do have it in our budget document as well. We know one of the key organizations is the Hamilton Urban Core Communities Health Center's Homelessness and Addiction Recovery Treatment Hub. I believe they used to be a safe consumption site, and they are looking to follow the provincial regulations to come out on how they can pivot and continue providing services in a way that is in line with the provincial regulations. But we also have here the YWCA's Safer Use Program, the Positive Health Networks VAN program, as well as other programs within those community networks. One of them is the Prescribed Alternatives and Outreach Program, which is more to do with public outreach.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you for naming some of them. I'm in the camp that we have to change. Many years we've been doing harm reduction, and in Vancouver and other places, they're changing their strategy because basically it does not work.
Questions, please.
So that's my opinion. So,
questions.
But the question to me is that I think the province, where they're looking at solutions, I think it's very important for us to learn what their solution is, which is rehab orientated, and that's what we need. But the second question I want to ask, you talk about bike lanes, how important it is for students, for everybody, for safety, and you said for the environment. Do you know if the location of the bike lanes, you believe there are the right location and there are the wrong location of bike lanes?
Yeah, so we actually, in our recommendations there, we identify 2 specific areas of concern near McMaster that really affect students, and that is King Street West and on Main Street. Basically, on King Street West, the bike lane is inconsistent, where it disappears at a certain point, so then the bikers along that path would have to merge into traffic. And on Main Street, we don't believe that there is enough bike lanes to kind of address the usage there.
Thank you.
Oh, I will also just add through the chair that we believe there are really great examples of bike lanes around campus. One of them is in the Ainsleywood community where I live, and the bike lanes they're dedicated to use bike lanes on both sides. They're very safe and they're very well used. So we do believe there are models that we can follow in creating new bike lanes near campus.
Okay, you said Main Street and King Street, we need more bike lanes. I had a few people say they go to work on McMaster from the mountain, and it takes them much longer. Main Street here and King Street, it's very congested. So do you believe that bike lanes in the wrong place is not climate change initiative because it causes congestion with cars?
Okay, respectfully, your chair is going to say that the question has been asked, the answer has been provided, the document has been referenced, and I think the delegates are suggesting that we need to engage further with the student body in order to inform these ideas moving forward. Is that fair? I don't want to speak for you.
That is fair, and we would be happy to meet and discuss these areas further and go into a little bit more depth about the areas which we're proposing these bike lanes and give a more wholesome view of the surrounding areas around McMaster.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, students want bike lanes, but we have to look at the whole city, and we have to look where they are at. So thank you, and
thank you. Questions? Councillor Kassar, please.
Thank you, Chair Wilson, and thank you for your delegation for the handout. I look forward to reading through it more thoroughly. I wondered if you could just elaborate a little more about the Urban Fellows Program. I was intrigued by that. You went through it very quickly. If you could just tell us a little bit more about it and where it's had success and what the successes have been in other municipalities. Thank you.
Yes, I can start us off. Mike can hop in here, but through the chair, this is a program that we found through our research and also that I've heard of having family in Toronto. It's a program for recent graduates in the Toronto area who are employed in municipal office. They get to work in project management. They get to learn about municipal office, work with the city as well as the council. And we've seen a lot of success in terms of continued interest from recent graduates, but also many of the participants of the program, they continue to work in council after graduation from the program. So they do see a lot of talent that they recruit, so much so that they want to keep them within municipal governance. And we would love to see that as a model program here in Hamilton, but more generally in the recommendation, we would also love to see opportunities to connect students with municipal governments and municipal engagement, whether through the Urban Fellows program or otherwise.
Yeah, thank you very much for your thorough answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other first-time speakers? If I could ask Councillor Danko to take the chair on my behalf, please, and thank you as the vice chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted you to expand, if you could, on your reference to, I think it was 45%, forgive me, on the number of students. Could you reference that? And I think it was in the context of students who were here and had to leave. I have a second question. I just would like you to confirm that figure, please, through the chair.
Through the chair, are you referring to the 45%
Yes.
students not considering staying in Hamilton post-grad?
Yes, thank you. So they're not considering, but they're wishing to consider. I'm just seeking clarification on what the measure was. Thank you.
I don't believe that we have further data on if they are looking to stay or not. However, that is an area of students that we can capture by providing opportunities for them to want to stay and really engaging them to consider Hamilton as a place to stay and grow and work and grow their families.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm hearing some synergy between Delegate Tenant, who was encouraging us to look for those levers to maximize our attraction over the long term. And I think I wanted to hear from you, from a student perspective, on if you could just expand a little bit through the chair on those things that you think, I call them magnets and glue. The magnet is a great post-secondary education or facility that draws you here, but it's the glue that we want you to stay here. And could you give us a sense of what students are looking for in order for them to stay here through the chair?
For sure, and I think that is really encapsulated throughout our whole document here. If we're investing in housing and renter protections, if we're investing in protections for increasing bike lanes, things like this, we're investing in renting bike lanes and creating opportunities through this Urban Fellows program. We're giving them opportunities where they feel that living in Hamilton is where they want to stay. So they're protected when they're renting. They have good, reliable transit through biking if that's the opportunity that they pursue. Safe transit through the HSR, and then also protecting and making our community safer through harm reduction initiatives and our policing recommendation. And also this employment recommendation that we're doing creates these opportunities for students that they're able to get work experience and jobs to be able to stay here. And investing in all of these things that we've said just further influences students to stay here past the graduation.
And if I can just add through the chair, I'll leave something concrete with council here. We know that McMaster University, we're situated on the west end of the city. We see that a lot of our students actually will not explore the rest of what the city has to offer. I believe the statistic we have is 10% have never explored a community outside of campus and outside of the community that they live in. And we have 12% who have only left campus 1 to 2 times in their undergraduate career. We think that to really fall in love with the city and want to stay here, you have to see everything that it has to offer. Out of all of the wards, we're from Ward 1, McMaster is situated in Ward 1, but every ward in the city has something to offer that we want our students to see. And the barriers are nuanced to why students aren't doing this. Part of it, some students have told us directly in our survey that they feel it's unsafe to leave campus communities, and we feel part of this is the stigma, and part of it is that there are initiatives and opportunities for funding to bridge those barriers. And part of it is also that employment piece, to give opportunities for students to engage, whether through employment or other opportunities, to see what the city has to offer. So we hope that we can collaborate with councillors and the city on that as well.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my question. I'll assume the chair. Thank you, Councillor Danko. There are no further questions for you. Thank you for your delegation here this afternoon and for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next person on my list is Delegate Carl Andrus from the Hamilton Community Benefits Network. I don't see Carl at the moment. I will circle back. Next up is Delegate Catherine Booth, McMaster University. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Madam Mayor, Chair, and members of the General Issues Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Catherine Booth. I'm a professor of political science at McMaster University, though I think they'd want me to say I am not speaking on behalf of my employer. I'm speaking as an individual. I've been a proud Hamiltonian for the past 15 years. I'm the parent of 2 school-aged children, and my family and I live in Ward 1. I'm speaking today as someone whose research expertise concerns the use of evidence in policymaking. and as a Hamiltonian who wants us to live up to the priorities that Council has set for our city, particularly in terms of making Hamilton a great place to live for everyone. I know this Council has been working hard on the issue of housing and homelessness. As you deliberate on the city's budget, my request is that you allocate resources in a way that aligns with the best available evidence about solutions to the crisis of housing and homelessness in Hamilton and so many other cities currently, that recognizes the basic human dignity of our unhoused neighbors, and that does not fall into the trap of thinking that the rights of housed and unhoused citizens are necessarily at odds. I'd like to address two important pieces of evidence related to these requests. First, evidence shows that pushing people who are living in encampments further to the margins, destroying their belongings, forcing them to separate from crucial support systems, and adding even more precarity and uncertainty to their lives does not address the problem of homelessness. The Federal Housing Advocate, part of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, has found that, quote, the role of police and bylaw officers should be de-emphasized in responses to encampments, and have called for an immediate end to forced evictions of encampments. The second piece of evidence that I will mention is that although emergency shelters are necessary, they are not housing. According to the recent AMO report, this is where the majority of spending on homelessness is allocated. I understand the need for immediate response when people are living outside, particularly in a week like we are having. But I also want us to keep in mind that the research shows that solutions like rent-geared to income housing are essential to the effective functioning of the homelessness system. But this is an area where demand far outstrips supply. Again, this is from the AMO report that was released earlier this month. This leads me to a general suggestion. Based on what I can see in the city's online budget simulator, we are currently spending twice as much on policing as we do on housing. Cutting 10% of the $200 million police services budget would be about $20 million, and that could be a 20% increase in the housing budget. What could the city do with an extra $20 million for evidence-based spending on housing? I say this realizing a few things. First of all, the $20 million is not enough to solve the immediate crisis or address its root causes. I am also aware that there is a separate process that leads to the creation of the police services budget. I'm furthermore keenly aware that the provincial government is not contributing to solutions in a meaningful way at this time. While we keep up pressure on other levels of government, I would like to see my municipal tax dollars spent in a way that is ambitious for real change on this issue and stretches what people thought a city could do. I discussed this issue at a neighborhood gathering this past weekend, and I was heartened by how many of my neighbors share my position and join me in urging you to spend our tax dollars in a way that respects our unhoused neighbors and offers continuing solutions based on evidence. I will share a written version of my remarks, and you will see a list of my neighbors' names and postal codes attached. At my last count, there were 18 of us. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Booth. Respectfully, and we have the permission from those 18 individuals for their names and...
Yes, yeah, no, I circulated an email after we chatted about it.
Okay, thank you. Speakers, Councillor Pauls, please.
Thank you for coming. There's something that you said that if we could take it, the $20 million from the police and put it with the homeless, we could maybe have a little better solution. I'm just wondering, when there's a crime in an encampment, which we had a lot of delegates come and talk about that, about crime, about there's been a death in an encampment, there's been lots of crime, who do you think we should call?
I actually wrote about this to City Council. I was looking back through my messages. Not the most recent time that the police services budget was continued, but the time before, so February 2024. And I referenced a peer-reviewed article I'm just going to see if I can pull it up. You know what, I'm probably not going to be able to pull it up in a timely fashion. But the article was part of a body of research that is looking at the effectiveness of alternative emergency response services. So folks who are trained in responding to mental health crises and who are trained in de-escalation and, facilitating safer resolutions to conflicts. So, as I said, I apologize, I don't have that on my fingertips right now, but I'd certainly be happy to provide a reading list if you'd be interested.
I talk to a lot of agencies that have, they're trained for de-escalation, like you said, and they're trained in mental health. And you know what they all tell me? They still want the police there. They still need police protection. I know because I've talked to them, a lot of them. You could send somebody that knows all about mental health, but you don't know what's going to happen. And
Counselor,
you always need the
Counselor,
police.
respectfully,
This
is a time for questions of the delegate. It's not our time to give our position on issues. That time will come.
Okay. I did ask you the question, who do we call? There is a lot of crime happening, and that's what we've been hearing. So again, I say, who do we call?
Yeah, I don't think I can provide a really short answer to such a complicated question, but I will say that when we ask that question of who should we call, I don't think it should be based on I don't think it should necessarily be based on this is what we've always done in the past, because we can kind of look around our city and see how that is working, particularly in the case of response to encampments. And I think it should be, again, to kind of take it back to my professional expertise, it should be based on evidence. So if you want to read more about or learn more about evidence-based for non-police responses to community violence and another issue, to the issue of homelessness, it's my job to make reading lists like this, and I'd be very happy to provide one.
Oh, that would be great. I appreciate that. I'm just saying, we all know that we spend $186 million on housing, and we're just spending $7 million on, homelessness. So I do appreciate you coming, and if you want to send me that information, I would love to receive it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Professor, for attending today. So I don't dispute what you're saying. The challenge that I'm having is I have not yet found a way for a council to direct a line item in the police budget, because the Police Service Act prohibits us from doing that. The chief will come here eventually and likely stand exactly where you are and give us what his budget is going to be, and we can vote to accept it. We can vote to send him back to the board to review it, or we can vote against it. But there has not been, to my knowledge, in Ontario, any municipality who's been successful in rejecting a police budget from a police chief. It's a very precarious way they do things, and I'm not sure how we would deal with it. We can most certainly raise the concern here, like you have raised, and the police chief will say, well, they have spent money on that, and they've given money out to different organizations to help them with that. So do you have, not sure the word I'm looking for, a way around that, advice on how we can maneuver through that process?
Through the chair, am I allowed to ask questions?
Well, if you think it will get us to a point of greater understanding, again, I offer the same advice to delegates as I do to members of this council is we're not here to engage in debate. We're here to listen to residents and what they're telling us about what they think about the budget. It is not a time also for councillors to state their position on issues. That time will come.
Yes, then through the chair, I think the thing I'd to kind of maybe clarify my position is, first of all, I don't know. I don't know how to change the process by which cities make decisions or police service boards make decisions about their budgets. But as a voter and a taxpayer, I want to know, is that money at least partially funded by municipal taxes? And as a voter, I want to know why my elected officials don't have more control over it. So again, I realize this is not, I'm not expecting the council to turn around tomorrow and say, oh, that was an interesting idea. Yes, let's turn over something that is actually controlled by provincial legislation. I want to offer a perspective that is maybe examining some of the assumptions that might be part of this process and asking to what degree they serve the citizens of the city.
Thank you for that, and that's completely fair. I mean, the Police Service Act is complicated by itself. The delegate had mentioned that she's going to share some information with Councillor Pauls, I believe it was. So if you could do the same thing for all of us, the reading list. We have struggled with this over the years, and I'm happy to receive any advice or any information that can perhaps give us that entry point in terms of how we can help address that challenge. And Chair, you know this all too well. It's been something that we have talked about many times. But I think the reading list might help us. And at least then we can share some of that information with the police services as well as the provincial government. Thank you very much for your time, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Horvath, ask questions.
Thanks very much, Chair. Appreciate your presentation and your offer. And I don't disagree that there's been an ongoing discussion and debate, as has been raised by members of council, our members of committee today. I wonder if you're aware of the rapid intervention support team that operates here in Hamilton.
Yes.
And so and you're aware that it provides mental health workers and support workers and paramedics, and it's a partnership with police, but also with mental health, with St. Joe's and with Hamilton Health Sciences, and so medical, mental health, paramedics, all of those things, all of those players, if you will, trying to address crises when they occur in the community. So you are aware of that. Is there something that is, in your opinion, lacking when it comes to that kind of a model, where the community partners pretty much try to do exactly the kind of thing that you're suggesting they do, which is not just go in with an enforcement attitude, but with supports and mental health assistance and all of those pieces?
Through the chair, I think that is exactly the direction that is kind of in line with what I would like to see. And I don't think I can usefully comment on the details of that particular program. I'm I'm not advocating for dismantling or taking away funding from programs like the Rapid Response Team that are effective. I'm just saying, you know, when I looked at the pie chart, which was very, very helpful, like the budget simulator online, I think is a great like point of accessibility for citizens to better understand municipal governance. I was surprised by the size of the housing slice in comparison to the size of the housing problem in our city. I know property taxes are high. I know, you know, again, as I said in my delegation, I know the provincial and federal government have, I think, unfulfilled responsibilities here. But if we take the position that maybe no help is coming in the immediate future from other levels of government, then how is the city going to allocate its resources? And I don't know if help is coming. Maybe it is, but.
Thank you, Chair. Just one other question, and that is, are you aware of the amount of housing resources that have been allocated by this council in its first couple of budgets? So in other words, we've been investing a lot more than had been in the past. We're in a much worse crisis than we have been in the past. Are you aware of those increases over time that we've dedicated, this council has particularly?
Yes.
So we're working on it, absolutely. Appreciate your comments and your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no further speakers. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you for your attendance. Our next in-person delegate is Scott Avery. Is there a Scott Avery in the chamber? Okay. I'm not seeing anyone rise. I'll come back to the names. Is there a delegate Evan Ubain? Yes? Okay. If you're watching online, we're just getting some IT set up here for the delegate. Good afternoon.
Okay, hello, members of council. Here to talk about the 2025 budget and some recommendations I have. So I'd appreciate it if I could have your attention for 5 minutes here. So to start with, I just wanted to touch on the proposed budget increase, which city staff has said amounts to about $318 on average per property owner. And that's based on an average property of about $387,000. So I've heard, a good amount of uproar about this. We can compare this to what renters have had to put up with. And as you can see, it's been much higher than that per year if we go on the average Hamilton rents reported by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation stats. So I don't know, before, taking what property owners are complaining about too seriously, I think it's got to go both ways. If we're going to appease property owners, clearly we need to focus first on renters who are paying far more on average per year than the increase to property owners. Second thing I wanted to touch on, similar to the last delegate, the history of the City of Hamilton police budget. And as you can see, it's been pretty stagnant, around 18% of the total levy per year. I guess there's a quote that people throw around a lot, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again or something like that. There's still, numbers of homeless people have, if anything, they're increasing. Something got to give here. The police is not addressing this problem. Keeping the funding of the police at this level is not addressing this problem. Looking into a little bit more individuals experiencing homelessness based on City of Hamilton statistics. Last year, about 1,600 people. Also based on City of Hamilton statistics, we have about maybe 600 shelter spaces. So clearly there's not enough. If we use Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation statistics, if we paid for an average one-bedroom rental apartment for all of these 1,600 people for 1 year, $30 million, and that's an average apartment. The police budget increase for this year is $23 million. So I put it to you that we could cover that because this, again, $29 million is based on an average rental, not the low end. And I also put it to you asking, when we have homeless people, are we better off allocating that funding towards more policing or towards housing? So if we're trying to address housing, just to be clear, should we put funding towards policing or towards housing? I think the answer should be pretty clear. So I don't know, just some questions I have from councillors based on what's been discussed over the last month or so. Number one, do we believe the city should focus more on people who have shelters than people who do not? So I've heard some talk about, we've been focusing too much on people who don't have a place to live. And to me, if they don't have a place to live, then they deserve that extra attention until they do. That seems like a basic tenet of humanity. Do councillors believe people are more likely to commit a crime if they do not have money to afford food and a house? So if the answer to that is yes, which is kind of universally accepted, then isn't it more efficient if we're looking to reduce crime to pay for housing than pay for police? The third thing, do councillors believe people should have to stay in a shelter even if they don't want to? We've heard from people who've delegated in the past how some people have families and a shelter is not a very good environment for that. There's a risk of COVID and other respiratory illnesses in packed shelter spaces. There's not much privacy. Should people be forced to stay there when there's no other option? And again, we don't even have enough shelter spaces. If we're concerned about drugs, which is a fair concern, are people more likely to address an addiction while housed or while homeless? And I'm out of time here. But again, if housing is the top concern, Do councillors think police or houses address the problem more efficiently? And 13 of you have voted the opposite, so I don't know. I guess I'm looking for answers, but that's all I have for you today, and I appreciate you giving the time.
Thank you, Delegate. I will, excuse me, I will look to see if there are any questions. I don't see any. Thank you for taking your time to be with us this afternoon and sharing your insight.
Yep.
Is Councillor Francis online, please? Councillor Francis? Thank you. Okay. Delegate Michael Fedchek, if I have that right. Good afternoon, and please correct me about the pronunciation of your names if I've erred.
No, that's correct. It's myself and OJ.
OJ, you'll be presenting together within the 5?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay, please. Thank you for being here.
So good afternoon, city staff, council members, and the general public. Thank you for having us. My name is OJ Byfield, and I am a member of Acorn and a tenant of Ward 5. Today, we are delegating in support of a 2025 budget that supports tenants. Now, a year ago, Hamilton passed the first anti-renovation bylaw in the province after a 6-year effort from tenants to raise the alarm about the high rate of renovictions in our community and the need for municipal action to preserve our existing affordable housing stock. Cities like Toronto and London have followed in Hamilton's footsteps, passing their own similar bylaws. This was a shining signal to our low-income tenants across Hamilton that this term of council members take the housing crisis seriously and is making moves to address it. Acorn Hamilton members have full confidence that this city council has the capability to continue to protect tenants from the ongoing crisis caused by the financialization of housing. Of the items in the 2025 budget, Acorn Hamilton unequivocally is in support of the...
Excuse me, sir.
Yep.
May I just ask you to put the microphone under your, that way if people
Sorry,
are watching at home, they'll be able to hear you well. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Of the items in the 2025 budget, Acorn Hamilton unequivocally is in support of the following items. The renovation and demoviction bylaws that started this new year because tenants need a fighting chance to keep their affordable housing when threatened with renoviction and demoviction, and these bylaws give us the tools to do so. The Tenant Support Program, and this program has already majority expanded the capacity of Acorn members and the organizers to reach out to our neighbors facing no-fault evictions and unfair rent increases. Lastly, we also call on Council to consider the following items for 2025 as part of our Beat the Heat campaign. Free transit during extreme heat alerts. Buses can be a part of the city's community heat strategy, providing cooling to residents in need, and also getting low-income riders to cooling centers. Continue the funding and the expansion of the air conditioner benefit program. Acorn's 2022 survey has found that many tenants struggle to afford the upfront cost of an AC. This program can support vulnerable and low-income tenants with the cost of a window or a portable unit to cool their apartment. High indoor temperatures are dangerous for tenants with health issues, young children, and seniors. Develop and implement a maximum heat bylaw for summer of this year. Acorn and its allies delegated on this item in November.
Acorn is encouraged by the incredible progress that this term of council has made in protecting tenants. With the implementation of an adequate temperature bylaw that is comprehensive, Hamilton can be a national leader in addition to being a provincial leader in tackling the housing crisis at the municipal level. The Max Heat bylaw started in Hamilton, and Hamilton should be the one to bring it home to the finish line. Thank you for hearing our delegation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegates? There are none. Thank you very much for taking the time to share your insights with us this afternoon. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go, I think that is the completion of our list, is it? Elsie McRae?
Sorry, through the chair, just confirming that that was both Michael and Hojay that were speaking together.
Believe that was in the
They were
affirmative?
combined? Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So that is the conclusion, but there's the three you might want to double check.
So I'm going to circle back to the top. The first one, Tony Wojciewicz. Is there a Tony Wojciewicz in the audience today? Okay, no, there is not. Carl Andrus. We all know what Carl looks like, and I don't see him. Scott Avery. Okay, that is our conclusion. Hopefully, if those individuals, for whatever reason, weren't able to join us, please feel free to give us a written submission. Thank you. Okay. On behalf of this committee, to those who have participated, really appreciate the time that you took. Thank you for coming out. I know it is cold. I really appreciate all your efforts and the insight. A mover to seconder to receive the delegates. Councillor Kazar, Councillor Clark. Show of hands, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. We have 6.2, written delegations respecting the budget. If I can have a mover and a seconder to receive those delegations, Mayor Horvath and Councillor Crutch. A show of hands, please. Thank you very much. That was carried. All the way to adjournment. There's no further business. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, members, for being here.